The human child stood surrounded by towering dragons, his skin glowing with a power no being in the universe had ever witnessed before. Tears streamed down his face as the alien research vessel that had once discarded him like garbage exploded in the atmosphere above. They thought he was just another failed experiment. They had no idea what they created. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I always love chatting with you, and it really helps support the channel. Also, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. 17 years earlier, in a remote cabin nestled deep within the pine forests of northern Montana, Sarah and Michael Wright welcomed their son into the world. They named him Elias, a perfect baby with 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon on his right shoulder. The young couple had chosen isolation for the birth, wanting peace away from the chaotic world, never imagining that their decision would change the fate of humanity forever. 3 days after Elias was born, they came. The lights appeared first, strange, pulsating blue orbs that drifted through the trees like curious spirits. Sarah noticed them through the kitchen window as she warmed a bottle for the baby. "Michael," she called, her voice barely above a whisper. "Come look at this." Michael emerged from the bedroom where he'd been watching their newborn sleep. He joined his wife at the window, his arm instinctively wrapping around her waist. "What are those?" he murmured, squinting at the dancing lights. Before Sarah could respond, the cabin's electricity failed. The gentle hum of the refrigerator died, plunging the space into silence broken only by their quickening breaths. The darkness lasted only seconds before an intense white light flooded through every window and crack in the walls. "The baby," Sarah gasped, breaking free from Michael's embrace and running toward the bedroom. She never made it. The front door burst open with a force that sent it flying off its hinges. 3 tall, slender figures stood in the doorway, their silhouettes eerily elongated against the blinding light behind them. Michael stepped forward, placing himself between the intruders and his wife. "Who are you? What do you want?" The figures advanced into the cabin. Now illuminated by the soft glow of the emergency lamp on the counter, their appearance became clear. Gray skin stretched tight over angular faces with enormous black eyes that reflected no light. They wore no clothing, but their bodies seemed covered in a metallic, scale-like texture that shifted colors as they moved. "Please," Sarah begged, backing toward the bedroom door. "Whatever you want, take it. Just don't hurt our baby." The tallest of the aliens tilted its head, regarding her with what might have been curiosity. It raised a 7-fingered hand, and Sarah froze in place, her body rigid as though gripped by invisible restraints. "No." Michael lunged forward, but another alien extended its arm, and he too became immobilized. The third alien glided past the paralyzed parents and into the bedroom. Moments later, it emerged holding baby Elias, who remained eerily silent in its arms. The infant's eyes were wide open, staring not with fear, but with an unnatural awareness at the creature that held him. "He is suitable," the alien holding Elias stated, its voice a discordant series of clicks and hums that somehow formed recognizable words. "The genetic markers match our requirements." "Requirements?" Michael strained against his invisible bonds. "What are you talking about?" "That's our son." The tallest alien approached Michael, its face inches from his. "Your species is primitive but possesses unique adaptive capabilities. This specimen will help us understand those capabilities." "Specimen?" Sarah's voice cracked. "He's a baby, not a lab rat. Please, he needs me. He needs his mother." For a brief moment, something like hesitation flickered across the alien's expressionless face. "The attachment bond is strong in your species." "Interesting." It turned to its companions. "We will take both the offspring and the female provider." "No," Michael roared, fighting so hard against the invisible force that blood vessels burst in his eyes. "Sarah, Elias." The alien holding Elias moved toward the door while the other approached Sarah. Michael watched in horror as his wife and child were dragged outside toward the blinding light. With a desperate surge of adrenaline and willpower, he managed to move one finger, then his hand, then his arm. The alien nearest to him noticed the movement and tilted its head in surprise. Remarkable resistance. Perhaps we should. Michael's fist connected with the alien's face, a sickening crunch accompanying the impact. The creature stumbled backward, dark blue liquid seeping from its nasal cavity. The momentary distraction weakened whatever force had been holding Michael, and he broke free, charging toward the door. Outside, he saw a massive craft hovering above the clearing in front of their cabin. A beam of light extended from its underside to the ground, and within that beam, Sarah and Elias were slowly rising toward the ship. "Sarah!" Michael screamed, running toward them. He jumped, fingers grazing the sole of Sarah's bare foot before she was lifted beyond his reach. The last thing Michael saw was his wife's tear-streaked face as she clutched their son to her chest. Then something struck him from behind, and darkness claimed him. When Michael Wright regained consciousness, the sun was high in the sky. He lay face down in the dirt outside his cabin, his head throbbing and dried blood caking the back of his neck. The events of the night before crashed back into his memory, and he scrambled to his feet, screaming his family's names into the empty forest. But they were gone. His wife, his son, his entire world vanished into the stars. For 3 days, Michael remained at the cabin, hoping, praying they would return. On the 4th day, he drove into town and reported his family missing. The official search turned up nothing, and the authorities eventually concluded that Sarah had fled with the baby, perhaps suffering from postpartum psychosis. No one believed Michael's story of aliens and spacecraft. Why would they? Michael never stopped searching. He sold everything he owned and dedicated his life to finding his family. He joined UFO research groups, attended abductee support meetings, and scoured every report of strange lights in the sky. Years passed, and his hair grayed, but his determination never wavered. He never knew that millions of light years away, his son was growing up in a laboratory. The Vexari were not cruel by nature. As a species, they considered themselves scientists first, explorers second, and conquerors a distant third. Their civilization had evolved beyond emotion-based decision-making, or so they believed. Their interest in humanity was purely scientific. Humans demonstrated remarkable adaptability compared to other species they had studied. Sarah Wright did not survive the journey to the Vexari homeworld. The stasis technology that preserved Elias during the long voyage wasn't calibrated for adult human physiology. By the time the scientists realized their error, Sarah's brain had suffered irreversible damage. They preserved her body for study, but discarded her consciousness as a failed sample. Baby Elias, however, thrived under their care. The Vexari assigned him a designation rather than a name, Specimen H-7291. They placed him in a habitat designed to approximate Earth conditions based on the limited data they had collected. It was sterile and functional rather than nurturing, but it kept him alive. The lead researcher on what they called the Human Adaptation Project was a Vexari named Zell. Unlike most of his peers, Zell maintained a curiosity about the emotional development of their subjects. While other scientists focused solely on physical and cognitive measurements, Zell observed how the human infant responded to various stimuli. The specimen exhibits distress behaviors when left alone for extended periods, Zell noted in his private research log. Providing tactile comfort reduces these behaviors significantly. This suggests a biological imperative for social bonding that may be linked to adaptive capabilities. Against protocol, Zell began spending additional time with the human child. He held Elias when he cried, spoke to him in soft tones, and even attempted to mimic the singing he had observed in human maternal behavior recordings. As Elias grew from infant to toddler, Zell noticed something unusual. The child's cognitive development was accelerating beyond the projected curve based on human standards. By age 3, Elias could solve puzzles designed for adult humans. By 5, he had mastered the basics of the Vexari language, something that should have been impossible given the different vocal structures of the two species. The specimen has demonstrated unprecedented neuroplasticity, Zell reported to the Research Council. I believe there is something unique about this particular human that warrants more specialized testing. The council approved Zell's request for genetic modification experiments. They began with small adjustments: enhanced strength, improved vision, accelerated healing. Elias tolerated these changes well, his body adapting to each modification without the rejection issues common in other species. Encouraged by these successes, the council authorized more ambitious experiments. They spliced Vexery genes with Elias's human DNA, created hybrid neural pathways, and introduced cellular regeneration capabilities far beyond human limits. What they didn't realize was that Elias understood everything they were doing to him. Behind his compliant exterior, the child was watching, learning, and planning. He had no concept of Earth or parents or what normal human life should be. But he knew he was different from his captors, and he knew they viewed him as a thing rather than a person. Except for Zell. In Zell, Elias found something approaching compassion. It wasn't love. Vexery were incapable of that emotion as humans understood it, but it was a form of care that made his existence bearable. When Elias was 7, everything changed. The Research Council reviewed the Human Adaptation Project and found the results promising but not revolutionary enough to justify its continuation. The Vexery had discovered another species in a nearby system that showed even greater potential for genetic research. Resources would be reallocated. What will happen to the human specimen? Zell inquired during the council meeting. Standard protocol for discontinued projects, the head counselor replied. Harvest any useful biological material and dispose of the remainder. Zell felt an unfamiliar sensation in his thoracic cavity, a tightness that might have been distress. The specimen has yielded valuable data. Perhaps we should consider preserving it for future reference. Your attachment to this specimen has been noted, Researcher Zell, another counselor observed. Perhaps you require a psychological evaluation. I am merely advocating for scientific thoroughness, Zell countered. The human's adaptability suggests potential value we may not yet recognize. After lengthy deliberation, the council reached a compromise. They would not destroy Elias outright, but would instead transport him to a low-priority research outpost on a distant moon where his development could be monitored with minimal resource allocation. Zell would not be permitted to accompany him. The night before Elias was scheduled for transfer, Zell visited his habitat chamber. The boy sat on his sleeping platform, reading a data tablet containing information about various galactic species. You are being relocated tomorrow, Zell informed him, using the Vexery language they typically communicated in. Elias looked up, his blue eyes unnaturally bright against his pale skin. The genetic modifications had left subtle marks on his appearance, a slight silvery sheen to his skin, pupils that contracted vertically like a cat's rather than in the human circular pattern. I know, Elias replied. I heard the guards talking. They think I will be terminated soon. Zell's inner eyelids flickered, a sign of discomfort. That is not the official decision, but it is the likely outcome. Elias set aside his tablet. I have served my purpose here. You have contributed significantly to our understanding of human adaptability. Elias tilted his head, mimicking a gesture he had observed in the Vexery. Is that all I am to you? A contribution to understanding? The question unsettled Zell in a way he couldn't articulate. What else would you be? On my home planet, I would be a person. I would have a name, not a designation. I would have family who valued me for existing, not for what data I could provide. Zell had never considered this perspective. In Vexery society, purpose and function were paramount. The concept of intrinsic value independent of utility was foreign. I have valued your development, Zell offered, uncertain if this was the appropriate response. A small smile curved Elias's lips. I know. That's why I'm going to miss you. For the first time in his scientific career, Zell felt inadequate to the situation. He reached into the pouch at his waist and removed a small device. This is a personal data storage unit, he explained, offering it to Elias. It contains all the information I have gathered about your species and your planet of origin. It may be useful to you. Elias accepted the device, his modified eyes widening slightly. Thank you, Zell. The outpost where you are being sent orbits a star system on the outer rim. It is not well supervised. The security protocols are minimal. Their eyes met, and understanding passed between them. Zell was giving him more than information. He was giving him an opportunity. The following morning, Elias was sedated and placed aboard a transport vessel bound for the outpost. Zell watched from the observatory as the ship departed, carrying away the subject that had occupied 7 years of his research, and, though he was only beginning to understand it, a significant portion of his capacity for attachment. Elias awoke during the journey, much earlier than his sedation should have allowed. Another benefit of his modified physiology was enhanced drug resistance. He remained still, eyes closed, breathing deeply as he assessed his situation through other senses. The transport was small, likely automated with minimal crew. He could detect the hum of engines, the subtle vibrations of a vessel traveling at sublight speed. There were 2 Vexari on board. He could smell their distinctive pheromones. Neither was Zell. Slowly, carefully, he opened his eyes. He was secured to a medical transport platform in the ship's small cargo hold. Various monitoring devices were attached to his body, tracking his vital signs. The sedative drip was still connected to his arm. Elias removed the needle from his vein and disabled the alarm on the monitoring system using techniques he had observed countless times in the laboratory. Then he waited, counting the ship's cycle changes that approximated day and night aboard Vexari vessels. On the 3rd cycle, the ship's engines changed pitch. They were approaching their destination. Elias knew this would be his best opportunity. During the docking procedures, the crew would be distracted, systems would be in transition. When he felt the distinctive shudder of the ship entering an atmosphere, Elias made his move. He released the restraints on his platform and moved silently to the cargo hold door. Using the access codes he had memorized from watching Zell, he bypassed the lock and slipped into the main corridor. The ship was even smaller than he had estimated. A basic transport with just a cockpit, crew quarters, and the cargo area he had escaped from. He could hear the 2 Vexari in the cockpit, discussing landing protocols. Neither had noticed that their passenger was no longer secured. Elias located the emergency evacuation pods, standard equipment on all Vexari vessels. He had studied their operation during his education sessions. The pods were designed for survival rather than navigation, but they would serve his purpose. Just as the transport began its final descent, Elias sealed himself inside an evacuation pod and initiated the launch sequence. The pod detached from the ship with a violent jolt, sending alarms blaring throughout the transport. Elias felt the pod tumble through space before its stabilizers engaged. Through the small viewport, he watched the Vexari transport grow smaller as the distance between them increased. The pod's basic navigation system indicated a habitable planet nearby, not the moon that had been his intended destination, but another world in the same system. The pod entered the planet's atmosphere, heat building around its exterior shield as Elias braced himself for impact. The landing was rough, sending him slamming against the restraints before the shock absorbers finally engaged. When the pod came to rest, Elias ran a quick system check. The atmosphere outside was breathable, though thinner than what he was accustomed to. Temperature was within human tolerance range. No immediate threats detected. Elias gathered the few supplies the pod contained: a basic medical kit, emergency rations, a multipurpose tool, and prepared to exit. He had no plan beyond escape, no knowledge of the world he had landed on. But for the first time in his life, he was free to make his own choices. The pod's door hissed open, revealing a landscape that took his breath away. Rolling hills covered in vegetation that resembled purple moss stretched to the horizon. The sky above was a deep amber color, with 2 small moons visible despite the daylight. The air smelled of something similar to cinnamon and ozone. Elias took his first step onto alien soil, the soft moss yielding beneath his bare feet. He felt a strange sensation in his chest, a lightness he had never experienced in the controlled environment of the laboratory. It took him a moment to recognize it as happiness. That feeling lasted precisely 73 seconds. The ground beneath his feet trembled. At first, he thought it might be a natural seismic event, but the vibration had a pattern to it. Regular, rhythmic, like footsteps. Elias turned slowly, his enhanced vision scanning the horizon. At first, He saw nothing unusual. Then the hillside behind him moved. What he had taken for a natural formation rose up, shedding purple moss and dark soil. An enormous creature unfurled itself from the landscape, where it had been perfectly camouflaged. Its body was serpentine but massive, easily the length of 3 Vexery transport ships laid end to end. Armored scales covered its form, reflecting the amber light of the sky. A row of spines ran down its back, each one taller than Elias himself. But it was the head that froze him in place, triangular, with a mouth full of teeth like polished obsidian, and eyes, intelligent eyes the color of molten gold that fixed directly on him. Elias had accessed enough Earth data from Zell's device to recognize what this creature resembled, though he had believed them to be mythological. Dragon. This was a dragon, and it wasn't alone. As Elias stood transfixed, more of the hillsides began to move. 5, then 10, then dozens of the massive creatures emerged from their camouflaged resting places, all turning to face the small human who had dropped so unexpectedly into their midst. The largest dragon, the first one Elias had seen, lowered its massive head until it was level with the boy. Hot breath washed over him, carrying scents of sulfur and something metallic. Elias remained perfectly still, his mind racing through possible responses. The Vexery had never prepared him for anything like this. The dragon inhaled deeply, drawing air past Elias as if sampling his scent. Then, to his astonishment, it spoke. "You smell of the void travelers," the dragon rumbled, its voice so deep that Elias felt it in his bones rather than heard it with his ears. "But you are not one of them. What are you, small one?" Elias swallowed hard. "I am human," he answered, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "My name is Elias." The dragon's pupils contracted to thin slits. "Human. We know this word. Long ago, before the void travelers came to our system, we visited the human world. Your kind called us gods and monsters." Its massive head tilted slightly. "But you are far from your world, little human. And you carry the stench of Vexery experimentation on you." Elias felt a chill run down his spine. These creatures knew the Vexery, and from the rumble that passed through the gathered dragons at the mention of them, they did not view them favorably. "I was their prisoner," Elias explained. "I escaped." A sound like distant thunder rolled from the dragon's throat. A laugh, Elias realized. "No one escapes the Vexery, little human. Not unless they are permitted to." "I did," Elias insisted. "They were transferring me to an outpost. They were going to dispose of me once I was no longer useful for their experiments." The dragon lowered its head further, one golden eye now directly in front of Elias, studying him with unnerving intensity. "Yes," it finally said. "I see the truth of it in you, and I see what they have done to you." The dragon's mouth opened slightly, revealing teeth longer than Elias's arm. "You are neither fully human nor anything else. A thing between worlds. Between natures." Elias felt his throat tighten. The dragon had articulated the nameless sense of displacement that had haunted him his entire life. "What will you do with me?" he asked quietly. The dragon raised its head again and turned to the others of its kind. A series of rumbles, growls, and high-pitched keening sounds passed between them. Their language, Elias realized. After what seemed like an eternity, the lead dragon turned back to him. "We will take you to the elders. They will decide your fate." Before Elias could respond, the dragon's tail whipped around with startling speed for something so large. It wrapped around his body, lifting him from the ground. Panic flared briefly before he realized the grip, while secure, was not crushing him. "Do not struggle, little human," the dragon advised as it placed Elias on its back, between 2 of the massive spines. "It is a long journey to the nesting grounds." With that, the dragon launched itself into the air, powerful wings that had been folded against its sides now extending to catch the wind. The other dragons followed, creating a formation that surrounded the lead dragon and its tiny passenger. As the ground fell away beneath them, Elias gripped the spine in front of him and tried to process his situation. He had escaped one form of captivity only to find himself in another. Yet something told him that the dragons, fearsome as they were, might offer him something the Vexery never had. a chance to be more than a specimen. From high above, none of them noticed the small Vexery scout ship that had followed the trajectory of the escape pod. Inside, a lone Vexery observer recorded everything before transmitting the data back to the homeworld. The Human Adaptation Project was about to enter a new phase. The dragons flew for what felt like hours, their massive wings barely moving as they rode thermal currents high above the alien landscape. Elias had long since overcome his initial fear and now sat cross-legged between the spines on the lead dragon's back, his genetically enhanced eyes taking in every detail of the world below. "What is this world called?" Elias asked, raising his voice to be heard above the wind. The dragon's scales vibrated beneath him as it responded, the deep voice somehow projecting back to where he sat. "We do not name our home as your kind does. To us, it simply is." The Vexery designation for this planet translates to Potential Resource 89C, typical of their kind to reduce everything to its utilitarian value. "You don't like the Vexery. They came to our system centuries ago," the dragon replied. "They saw us as animals to be studied, despite our attempts to communicate. When they discovered we were sentient, they labeled us suboptimal for research purposes and largely ignored our world except for occasional resource extraction." The lead dragon began a steep descent toward what appeared to be a massive caldera of an extinct volcano. Steam rose from vents scattered across the crater floor, and as they drew closer, Elias could see that the interior walls were honeycombed with cave openings of various sizes. The dragons landed on a wide, flat area at the center of the caldera. The heat was intense, radiating up from the ground itself. The lead dragon lowered its body, allowing Elias to slide off onto the smooth, warm stone. Immediately, he was surrounded by curious dragons of all sizes. "The hatchlings are curious," the lead dragon explained as several of the smaller dragons edged closer to Elias. "They have never seen a human before." One particularly bold hatchling, with scales the color of polished bronze, approached Elias and nudged his hand with its snout. The touch sent an unexpected jolt through his body, like static electricity, but warmer. "They're beautiful," Elias said, cautiously reaching out to stroke the hatchling's head. Its scales were smooth and surprisingly warm to the touch. The little dragon made a sound remarkably like a purr. "Careful," the lead dragon warned. "Dragon fire manifests early, even in the young ones." As if on cue, the hatchling opened its mouth and hiccuped, releasing a small puff of blue flame that singed the hair on Elias's arm. He jumped back, more startled than hurt, while the assembled dragons made the rumbling sounds he now recognized as laughter. "Come," the lead dragon said. "The elders await." Inside the largest cave, the chamber opened into a vast space lit by pools of what appeared to be molten lava flowing in channels along the walls. At the center lay 3 enormous dragons, each easily twice the size of his guide. Their scales had lost much of their luster, faded to a dull gray that suggested great age. "Approach, human child," the central elder said, its voice so deep that Elias felt it in his chest more than heard it with his ears. "I am Elias," he introduced himself, his voice steady despite the intimidating audience. "That is your human designation," the elder on the left said. "But you carry more than human blood now. The Vexery have changed you at the deepest level." The central elder extended its neck, bringing its massive head close enough to Elias that he could see his own reflection in its pupil. The dragon inhaled deeply, drawing air past him as if tasting his essence. "Dragon," the elder finally said, "you carry a trace of our kind within you as well." Murmurs rippled through the assembled dragons. Elias felt a chill despite the chamber's heat. "How is that possible? I've never encountered dragons before today." "The Vexery have been collecting genetic material from species across the galaxy for millennia," the central elder explained. "They likely acquired dragon DNA during their early explorations of our world and incorporated it into their experiments with you. The question," the central elder continued, "is what to do with you, Elias of Earth. You are neither fully human nor dragon nor Vexery, but something new, something potentially dangerous." "I just want to be free," he said quietly. "I've spent my entire life as a specimen, a test subject. I don't want to be an experiment anymore." As if summoned by the elder's words, a dragon sentinel burst into the chamber, wings partially extended in alarm. "Void ships approach," the sentinel announced. "Vexery vessels, at least 3, entering our atmosphere." The chamber erupted in growls and roars as the dragons reacted to the news. The lead dragon that had brought Elias stepped forward. "The escape pod must have been tracked," it said. "They followed its trajectory here." The central elder rose to its full height, towering over everyone in the chamber. "Prepare the defensive formations. Protect the hatchlings and the sacred flame." "This is my fault," Elias said. "They're here because of me." "Let me help," Elias said, surprising himself with the offer. "This is my fight too." The 3 elders exchanged another silent communication before the central one nodded slowly. "Very well. But first, we must awaken what sleeps within you." Before Elias could ask what that meant, the elder lowered its massive head and exhaled a gentle breath over him. The air shimmered with heat and something else, an energy that made the hair on his arms stand on end. The other 2 elders did the same, surrounding Elias in a triangle of draconic breath. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Elias felt a burning sensation spread from his chest to his extremities, not painful but intense. His vision blurred, then sharpened beyond anything he had experienced before. Sounds became clearer, smells more distinct. And deep within his modified genes, something awakened, dormant dragon DNA responding to the presence of its kind. When the sensation subsided, Elias looked down at his hands. His skin now had a subtle iridescence to it, catching the light like the finest opals. He could feel strength flowing through his muscles, a power he had never known before. "What did you do to me?" he whispered. "We did nothing but catalyze what was already there," the central elder explained. "The Vexery placed dragon essence within you, but never activated it." A distant explosion shook the chamber. The battle had begun. "Go," the central elder commanded. "Join Carix, who brought you here. Stay with him and do as he instructs." Elias found Carix, the lead dragon who had carried him, organizing the defense at the caldera's edge. "The elders awakened the dragon essence in me," Elias explained breathlessly. "They said I should stay with you." From their vantage point, Elias could see 3 Vexery ships hovering above the caldera. They were much larger than the transport he had escaped from, combat vessels equipped with weapon systems that glowed ominously along their hulls. A voice boomed from the central ship, speaking in the Vexery language. "Attention indigenous life forms. You are harboring specimen H-7291, property of the Vexery Science Directorate. Surrender the specimen immediately or face appropriate consequences." Carix demonstrated his power by inhaling deeply, his chest expanding to twice its normal size. When he exhaled, the flame that erupted from his mouth wasn't simple fire, but a concentrated beam of blue-white energy that struck the nearest Vexery ship with devastating precision. The ships responded with energy weapons of their own, firing at the dragons with ruthless efficiency. Several dragons fell, their bodies tumbling down the caldera walls. Elias watched in horror as the bronze hatchling that had greeted him earlier was caught in a blast, its small form going still. Something snapped inside him. Rage unlike anything he had ever experienced flooded his system, and with it came power. The dormant dragon DNA the elders had awakened now fully activated, responding to his emotional state. Elias stepped forward, breaking away from Carix's protective wing. He raised his hands toward the nearest Vexery ship, not knowing what he intended to do, but driven by instinct and fury. Energy surged through him, collecting in his palms before erupting outward in twin beams of intense white light. The beams struck the ship's shields with far greater force than even the largest dragon's fire, causing them to flicker and fail. His next blast hit the hull directly, cutting through the advanced alloy like it was paper. The Vexery ship listed to one side, smoke pouring from the wound Elias had created. Emergency systems engaged, force fields containing the atmosphere breach, but the damage was severe. The remaining two Vexery ships changed tactics, concentrating their fire on Elias's position. Carix swept his tail around, knocking Elias aside just before a blast would have hit him directly. They've identified you as the primary threat. Move. Elias scrambled to his feet and ran along the caldera rim, energy weapons tracking his movement. Dragons intercepted many of the blasts, their massive bodies absorbing impacts meant for him. Their sacrifice only fueled his rage and determination. He needed to get closer to the ships. He jumped, not a human jump, but one powered by the dragon's strength now flowing through his modified muscles. He soared upward, covering half the distance to the nearest ship before beginning to fall. Carix caught Elias mid-fall and carried him directly toward the central Vexery vessel, the largest of the three and likely the command ship. When they were directly above the ship, Carix released Elias. He dropped onto the vessel's upper hull, his enhanced body absorbing the impact. Immediately, he placed his palms against the metal surface and channeled his energy into the ship. This time, he didn't create external beams. Instead, he sent the power directly into the ship's systems, feeling for weaknesses. He found them in the neural interfaces that controlled the Vexery technology, systems similar to those he had been connected to during countless experiments. Inside the ship, alarms blared as systems failed one after another. Navigation, weapons, life support, all falling to Elias's infiltration. Through the hull, he could hear the panicked clicks and hums of Vexery communication as they tried desperately to regain control. A familiar voice cut through the chaos, one Elias recognized immediately. "Zell, cease fire immediately," Zell's voice commanded over the ship's external speakers. "We are powering down weapons. We seek dialogue only." The attacking ships powered down their weapon systems, though they maintained their defensive shields. The dragons ceased their assault as well, gathering on the caldera rim to watch the unexpected development. A hatch opened in the hull not far from where Elias stood. Zell emerged, his slender Vexery form immediately recognizable despite the protective suit he wore. "Specimen H-7291, Zell began, then corrected himself. "Elias, we have been searching for you." "To terminate me?" Elias challenged, energy still crackling around his fingers. "To harvest useful biological material and dispose of the remainder?" Those were the Council's orders. "The situation has changed. What you just demonstrated, it exceeds all projected outcomes for the Human Adaptation Project. The Council wishes to continue your development under improved conditions." Elias laughed bitterly. "You mean you want to study how to replicate what I just did? Create weapons out of other stolen children? Your understanding is limited," Zell insisted. "The Vexery seek knowledge for its own sake." "Lies," rumbled Carix, landing on the ship's hull with enough force to make the entire vessel shudder. "Your kind has always sought power above all else. The boy is not yours to claim." Elias stepped forward. "I belong to myself," he stated firmly. "Not to the Vexery, not to the dragons. My life is my own." "You misunderstand your position, Elias. You are unique in the galaxy, a successful hybrid of multiple species with abilities we have only begun to comprehend. Your value is incalculable." "My value," Elias repeated, anger rising again. "My worth as a person isn't determined by how useful I am to you. The Council has authorized me to negotiate your return with significant improvements to your living conditions and research protocols." "There will be no negotiation, Zell. I'm not going back. Ever. That is not an acceptable outcome," Zell stated flatly. "It's the only outcome," Elias replied. "Return to your council. Tell them specimen H-7291 no longer exists. Tell them Elias of Earth and Dragon has claimed his freedom, and any attempt to reclaim him will result in consequences far worse than what you witnessed today. You are making a grave error, Elias. Without proper maintenance, your modified systems will begin to degrade. The pain will be substantial." Elias smiled coldly. "I've lived with pain my entire life, Zell. It's an old friend. But freedom? Freedom is worth any price." Zell retreated back into the ship without another word. Moments later, the hatch sealed, and the vessel began to pull away. The other ships followed suit, ascending toward the amber sky. Elias watched them go, a strange mixture of emotions churning within him. Relief, triumph, fear, uncertainty, and underneath it all, a profound sense of loss. "They will return," Carrick said quietly. "I know," Elias replied, "but we'll be ready." In the days that followed, Elias began his training with the dragons. He learned to control the energy that flowed through him, to channel it for specific purposes rather than allowing it to explode in bursts of raw power. He discovered abilities that even the dragons found surprising, not just destructive but creative applications of the hybrid energy he commanded. He could heal injuries, accelerating cellular regeneration in ways that amazed even the dragon healers. He could communicate telepathically with the dragons, bridging the gap between their ancient mind speech and his human thought patterns. And as his control increased, he found he could even manipulate his physical form slightly, adopting draconic characteristics when needed. The bronze hatchling he thought had died had survived, though injured. She became his constant companion, her wing healing faster than expected under his care. The young dragon's presence seemed to stabilize Elias's more volatile emotions, while his human capacity for adaptable thinking intrigued and inspired her. Months passed in relative peace. The Vexery made no immediate attempt to reclaim him, though occasional scout ships were spotted at the edges of the system. Then, on the one-year anniversary of his arrival on the Dragon World, everything changed again. Elias was meditating at the edge of the caldera when Carrick landed beside him with unusual urgency. "The Sentinels have detected something," the dragon announced. "A ship has entered our system, but it is neither Vexery nor of any design we recognize. Hostile. Unknown. Its trajectory suggests it is searching rather than attacking. And its technology." Carrick hesitated. "The Elders believe it may be of human origin." Elias's heart skipped a beat. "Human? That's impossible." The Vexery said humans don't have interstellar travel capability yet. "The Vexery are known to withhold truth when it serves their purposes," Carrick reminded him. "In high orbit around the planet, they found the mystery ship. It was small compared to Vexery vessels, clearly designed for speed rather than combat. Its hull bore markings that Elias couldn't read from this distance, but something about its design stirred a memory deep within him. "It's human," he confirmed, his mental voice tight with emotion. "But how? What?" As if in answer, the ship's communication system activated, broadcasting on frequencies the dragons monitored. A voice, a human voice speaking English, filled Elias's mind through his connection with Carrick. "This is Captain Michael Wright of the Earth Vessel Seeker, broadcasting on all frequencies. I am searching for my son, Elias Wright, taken by non-terrestrial entities approximately 18 Earth years ago. Any information leading to his recovery will be rewarded." This message repeats. Elias nearly fell from Carrick's back in shock. Michael Wright, his father, the man whose face he had never seen, whose voice he had never heard, was here, in this distant system, still searching after all these years. "How is this possible?" he asked, his mental voice trembling. Carrick's thoughts came back tinged with something like respect. "Your father must be a remarkable human. Few beings in the galaxy would pursue a search across such vast distances and time." "We need to contact him," Elias urged. "Can you bring me closer to the ship?" "It would be safer to bring him to our world," Carrick countered. "The Vexery may be monitoring his transmissions as well." Elias worked with the dragons to create a signal the human ship would recognize, directing it to a safe landing site away from the main dragon nesting grounds. As they waited, Elias paced nervously, 1,000 questions racing through his mind. The ship descended through the atmosphere, following their signal to a flat plain several miles from the caldera. Elias and Carrick watched from a ridge overlooking the landing site, joined by several other dragons maintaining a protective perimeter. The ship was even more impressive up close, sleek and efficient, with technology that seemed advanced even by Vexery standards. As its engines powered down, a hatch opened in the side, and a single figure emerged. Michael Wright was older than in the images Elias had seen in Zell's data files. His hair was gray, his face lined with years of hardship and determination. He wore a simple flight suit with a patch on the shoulder bearing a symbol Elias didn't recognize. "Stay here," Elias told Carix. "I need to do this alone." Elias descended from the ridge, approaching the human ship and its lone occupant with measured steps. As he drew closer, Michael Wright spotted him and froze, one hand rising to shield his eyes from the amber sun as he stared in disbelief. Elias stopped a few meters away, suddenly uncertain. What does one say to a father who is a stranger? To a man who has crossed the stars to find a son who barely remembers him? Elias. Michael's voice broke on the name. Hope and fear mingled in equal measure. "Is it really you?" Elias nodded, emotion closing his throat. "It's me. How did you find me?" Michael took a tentative step forward, then another. "I never stopped looking. When the aliens took you and your mother, I promised I would find you no matter what it took." His eyes roamed over Elias's features, noting the subtle differences, the two bright eyes, the faint iridescence of his skin. "What did they do to you?" "It's a long story," Elias replied. "But I'm still me. Still your son." Something broke in Michael's expression then, the last barrier of doubt or fear. He closed the remaining distance between them and pulled Elias into a fierce embrace. "My boy," he whispered, his voice raw. "My son." Elias returned the embrace awkwardly at first, then with increasing certainty. This was real. This was family, not the clinical interest of Zell or even the protective alliance of the dragons, but a connection that transcended the changes the Vexery had wrought upon him. When they finally separated, Michael wiped tears from his eyes. "I have so much to tell you. After the attack, I dedicated my life to finding you. I joined every research project related to extraterrestrial contact. When the first Vexery scout ship crash-landed on Earth 5 years ago, I was part of the recovery team." "Vexery on Earth?" Elias was stunned. They never mentioned any contact. Michael's expression hardened. They wouldn't. The ship was damaged, the crew dead except for one. Before it died, it transmitted data back to its homeworld, including the location of Earth. Our government kept it quiet to prevent panic, but those of us who had encountered these beings before recognized them. We reverse-engineered their technology. It took years, and this is just a prototype, but when we detected Vexery transmissions from this system mentioning a human subject, Michael's voice caught. I volunteered immediately. Before Elias could respond, Carix's warning filled his mind. Vexery ships approaching. Many of them. Elias looked up to see multiple points of light descending through the atmosphere. A full battle fleet, far larger than the force that had attacked the Dragon Caldera. "We need to move," Elias told his father urgently. "The Vexery are coming, and this time they're not here for negotiation." Michael followed his gaze to the approaching ships, his expression grim but determined. "My ship has weapon systems. Not enough to fight a fleet, but maybe enough to cover an escape." "No escape," Elias said firmly. "This is my home now. These are my people." He gestured toward the ridge where Carix and the other dragons were now visible, preparing for battle. "And I won't abandon them." Michael stared at the dragons in amazement, then back at his son, at the subtle glow of his skin, the power that seemed to radiate from him. A look of understanding and pride crossed his face. "Then we fight," he said simply. "Together." As the Vexery fleet descended toward them, Elias stood between two worlds, the human father he had just found and the dragon family that had given him purpose. He felt the dragon power surge through his modified genes, stronger now than ever before. The human child who had once been merely specimen H-7291 raised his hands toward the sky, energy crackling between his fingers as he prepared to defend his newfound freedom. Behind him, dragons rose into the air, their wings blocking out the amber sun. Beside him, his father activated systems on the human ship that shouldn't have been possible with Earth technology. And within him, human determination merged with dragon power to create something the galaxy had never seen before, a defender who would show the Vexery exactly what their experiment had become. The final battle for Elias's freedom was about to begin, and this time, Humanity would stand alongside the dragons against those who would treat sentient beings as mere specimens. This time, the experiment would teach the experimenters a lesson they would never forget. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.